All right, let's get right into it. It's Bruce Marshall. It's college football season. And, with so many of these Power Five teams matched up with Group of Five or even FCS teams, nobody better to bring on. I mean, as well versed in all 130 some odd teams, not just the major teams. Bruce Marshall of VegasInsider.com, CBSSportsline.com. Brucey, how long we been doing this on the radio and on podcasts? I mean, for radio, 25, 30 years,
Well, about
you know?
25, yeah, late 90s, I think we started, yeah.
Yeah, so the,
Yeah.
the Jerry DiNardo era at
Yes.
LSU. Yes, yes. And
Yes.
now, Earl Weaver wasn't still around, though, was he, back
I
then?
don't think so, but not far away, though.
How about those Orioles? They just won't
I
lose. Let's
know.
get right to it. And this is one of the few Power Five matchups. SEC Tennessee, 28-56 at home against ACC Virginia. Now, the switch at quarterback, Milton, is not as sharp as his predecessor, but Heupel has this high resource, high expectation, high budget program back to respectability. And some people think it's sustainable, including Nick Saban, who got out of the non-conference teams because Tennessee was supposed to be the weakest of their three. So 28 is a big number, Bruce, but Virginia, I don't know anybody that hasn't picked them to finish last in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean it's really bad. I know it's a Power Five matchup in name only because Virginia in performance I don't think even rates that high. But back to Tennessee, I think this is really an intriguing storyline to follow in the SEC this year. Is how Joe Milton fares. A couple of notes here. This reminds me a little bit. And what Tennessee had the last couple of years. Long ago, Pete Carroll, when he was at SC, came into the 2003 season, and it was either Matt Leinart or Matt Corral he's going to go with, and they made the decision right at the end. Okay, we're going to go with Leinart. But Carroll came back later and said we could have gone with Corral and we'd have won too. And we saw Corral actually have a better NFL career than Leinart. Let me say this about Milton. Hendon Hooker wasn't that good at Virginia Tech. He came into this situation with Heupel and he flourished. Milton actually beat him out 2 years ago as a starter, and at the start of 2021, Hooker looked like he'd be a little bit better, so Heupel went that way, and Hooker really flourished in that offense. I think there's a chance Milton can flourish too, and we saw at the end of last season, Jimmy, and we remember the Vanderbilt game, and certainly the Orange Bowl against Clemson. Milton looked awfully good. Listen, he's been on the big stage before. He was at Michigan before he came here, and and he looked very good at the end of last year. So I'm not thinking there's going to be a lot of drop off this year. As good as Hooker was last year, I think Milton's going to put up some pretty good numbers too. It's because of this offense. But the bigger story here, like you mentioned, Jimmy, is on the other side. Let's put this into some context. And I hate to kick on Virginia here after what happened in the tragedy on campus in Charlottesville last November. They had to cancel their last two games. But for the purpose of this, before that, Tony Elliott did a very bad job last year in his first year as head coach. And when I was at ACC Media Day last summer in Charlotte, and Elliott came up there and talked to the group, I mean, he said right off the bat, we're going to slow things down. We're going to run the football more. We're going to play, try to play power football. Now, they had a lot of their offensive line had left before the previous season, but he took what was one of the most potent attacks in the country the year before and just and neutered it effectively. And Brennan Armstrong was one of the top producing quarterbacks in the country. 2021, when Bronco Mendenhall was running an up tempo, his numbers were terrible last year. He dropped into the abyss. He couldn't wait to get out into the portal. He's now at NC State. You're offering a starting quarterback job in the ACC, and all these quarterbacks are moving in the portal. All you could get is a guy coming up from Monmouth,
Right.
from FCS, Tony Muskett. That's who Elliott's got. And I think Virginia should have looked one more thing at Clemson. When Elliott was there, I know they had some big years, definitely big years, but he also had Deshaun Watson and he had Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. And the year before he got hired by Virginia, that was 2021 at Clemson. That was the year post Trevor. Offense was horrible that year. They were a triple digit ranked offense. So, Jimmy, I think you or I could maybe have coordinated Clemson and looked pretty good with those guys at quarterback. Elliott's credentials here, I think, are really under question. He did a terrible job last year. I think they could get smoked here. This game is at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, so it's going to be a big pro
All right.
Tennessee crowd.
Okay,
Volunteers.
Tennessee minus a 28. Let's move on. Yeah, Brendan Armstrong now at NC State. He was kind of a one-man show when he was healthy in Charlottesville. USC got backdoored last week against San Jose State. Also gave up a lot of first downs in yardage. The San Jose State much more competitive, maybe than the final score even indicates. USC at home again, 39 and 66.5 against Nevada.
Well, that's what happens when you're giving up 39, 40 points or plus 30. I mean, you can get backdoored really easy. And the concern I'd have here for SC, if anybody wants to bet on them, I mean, look, this defense, I'm not sure it's that much better than it was last year. They still tend to give up too many big plays, Jimmy. And that's what we saw last week against San Jose State. And their quarterback, Cordero, who could move a little bit, obviously caused SC some problems too when he escaped the pocket. Now, we know Caleb Williams is going to put up all sorts of numbers. Though it was interesting, Lincoln Riley did pull him out in the fourth quarter last week after they had the big lead. Nevada comes in. It's a bad year for Nevada last year. The second half of the last 10 games of the season, they didn't win. They only covered the spread twice. It was a horrible offense last year. The quarterbacks couldn't move in Ken Wilson's first year. He hit the portal very hard. I mean, we talk about what Dion brought out a new team in the portal. Well, Wilson wasn't that far behind, and mostly through the Pac-12. That's where he was from before at Oregon, including his quarterback Brendan Lewis. Speaking of Dion, he was at Colorado before during Carl Burrell's years, and he quarterbacked most of 2021. He can move at least, and I think for a team like Nevada and a lower level, group of five team to have a quarterback who can move, that's important. He's going to keep a few drives alive and a few possessions alive at least. The defense wasn't that bad for Nevada. That's what Wilson's specialty is. You're talking almost 40 points here. You could be up 49-7 in the fourth quarter. You get backdoored, you lose the spread number. That's a huge mountain to climb. SC has also failed to cover 5 of its last 6, laying double digits, and only got past this number once last year, and that was the opener against Rice. I'm taking Nevada plus, and it's only because of all these points, but that's too many for SC with still some defensive questions to be laying against anybody right now.
Yeah, last year for Nevada was some extreme circumstances. Their coach left, and he took a lot of the players with him. So it was one of those teams that don't overreact to last year. They'll be better. Just how much better? Well, that's $1 million question, but they certainly will be better. All right, let's go to Washington State and Colorado State. This one is at Fort Collins. Speaking of the Rams, the Cougars 11.5 and 54.5 at Colorado State, Bruce.
Yeah. By the way, this might be a conference game as soon as next year. If
Right.
we'll follow this stuff with Washington State to see how this goes. But nonetheless, for this Saturday, I'm a little reluctant sometimes, Jimmy, to take totals trends and to project them onto the next season. I usually like to wait and see if a team's how they're trending totals wise. But I mean, sometimes you can go ahead and I think hook into what previous trends were for both these, especially Colorado State. It was an under team max last year, 11-1 to the under in Jay Norvell's first year. That offense just couldn't get off the tarmac last year. They didn't score more than 20 points in any game. They've still got a lot of their people back from last year. I mean, Clay Millen, a quarterback, he couldn't do anything. He completed a good percentage of passes. They were all dump offs. They were screens. They were flares. They were digs. They didn't throw the ball downfield because he didn't have time to throw. He got sacked 59 times last year, Jimmy. He just didn't have time to throw. Washington State notorious for a lot of blitzing here, and I don't know that Millen's going to have much time to throw or get the ball downfield. The other side, Cam Ward is back from Washington State at quarterback, though a new coordinator for Jake Dickert after Eric Morris moved away down in North Texas. Of course, he had come up with brought Ward from Incarnate Word. But this isn't the old Leach air raid there. They a lot of short passes last year. They moved down the field a lot shorter. They took a lot more time. They were a heavy under team too last year, and I just don't see this thing getting out of hand. The clock's going to keep moving with short completed passes. That's the other thing with Colorado State last year. They were throwing all these. It's like almost a Navy. Army sort of thing last year. The clock moves in their games because these short completed passes. I think 54.5 is way too high, Jimmy. I'm going to stick with the trends from last year. The best under team in the country last year was Colorado State. Let's make them prove they're not that this year. So I'm going to look under in Fort Collins on Saturday, Cougars and Rams.
After seeing the new clock in action for the first time, the new clock rules, I should say, with the clock stopping with a first down but not out of bounds.
Right.
I think it really the biggest difference is before the halves.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can have a minute, no timeouts, and go 75, 80 yards without kind of overdoing it. If you had proper, that's not happening anymore. So it really came into play. Navy was just so bad they couldn't stop, before the end of the half against Notre Dame in their hurry-up offense. All right, let's go to Iowa City and Iowa. Kind of trying to look at the Michigan transfer at quarterback. Is he going to be out with that quad ham? We'll have to see. 24-44 over Utah State.
Yeah, and some interesting things at Iowa this year. Kirk Ferentz. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him and his son Brian as the offensive coordinator. Who wouldn't be there if he wasn't his son? But
Nepotism,
it happens, but everywhere these days. But so they put a little kicker into Brian's contract this year. I mean, where he had to average at least 25 points per game, or at least he wouldn't. Not that they would fire him, but I mean,
Bruce, you got the over or under on that 25? Because that's not going to be easy.
Well, it's not going to be easy, but I have an under on their defense, though, Jimmy, and that's why Iowa is an under team. I don't think they can't just say, okay, we're going to score a lot more points this year. It's not that easy, and especially with McNamara, we don't know about his status. I'm hearing probably not. They'll probably hold him out this week because that leg injury hasn't really improved enough since early August. So no reason to rush it. They need him, for tougher tests than this.
Right.
But it's the defense, Jimmy. We saw them last year. I mean, they allowed less than 14 points per game, and that includes one game where Ohio State scored more than 50. We saw the bowl game last year against Kentucky. Admittedly, Will Levis didn't play in that game. Kentucky couldn't do anything, but that was consistent throughout much of the season. Offenses that struggle really get asphyxiated against this Iowa defense. Phil Parker's done this for several years. He's got most of the guys back from last year. We saw Nevada, Mountain West team we talked about him a second ago, go in there and get blanked in Iowa City last year. Blake Anderson's offense went way down at Utah State last year. They really had a downgrade from 2021. He's got Legas, the quarterback, back in the fold. But, I mean, most of the rest of the offense, he's lost a lot of outflow in the portal, a lot of new faces there. They're not going to score much at all. So the under here, yeah, I'll see it to believe it if I was going to score more points. But I do know a team like Utah State ain't going to score much against this Iowa defense. They take pride in shutting you down. So it's an under for me until further notice, and that's what it was a lot last year for Iowa.
Say what you want about Kirk Ferentz, but, I mean, let's face it. I mean, he doesn't have any more resources than Nebraska, and he's sure outperforming them, for year after year after year. They have a lot returning on their defense too, Bruce.
Yeah.
And they're a conventional team. They huddle. I mean, they're not going tempo, and they're fine with playing field position. And, I mean, that's what their roster, for the most part, lends itself to. That's in the best interest of them to win, 8-9 games a year. Yeah. So, I mean, look, you always, people get caught up with trying to get over the hump, but sometimes, I mean, you don't appreciate, winning 75% of your games.
And that's still the number one thing. They're winning. If he goes 9-3, 10-2, they'll be happy and they'll live with Brian Ferentz, whatever the offense does. But Kirk has won consistently there with the same style. He's not going to change his stripes that much after 24 years or whatever.
No, absolutely not. And that's one of my over teams for their win total this year. They're the nature of that injury, you do not want to rush it back because then you hurt it, you injure it severely, and could have long-term effects. So it's kind of tricky, but he's going to be better than what they've had at quarterback. I know that. I mean, no, they're not going to just be a dynamic offense all of a sudden, but he will be better. I like Iowa, this team, but got to get that quarterback back. And then Monday night, look at this one on the surface. Clemson Duke. It's a route, whatever. No. Not that Duke's 35,000-seat stadium is an imposing place to play, but, I mean, Duke was so close to beating their crosstown rival, North Carolina, for a 10-win season. Elko, ACC Coach of the Year, deservedly so. And look at their roster, Bruce. There's tons of juniors and seniors in there. Riley Leonard is legit. He is a true dual threat. He could throw for about 235, rush for about 13 TDs. this Duke team has a lot returning in a tricky spot here for Clemson, 13-56.
Yeah, they do. And Duke, the schedule's a little tougher this year for Duke, so it might be kind of tough to get to 9 wins again. But I don't put that beyond Elko to do. I mean, we know some of these career coordinators, and he was a very high-profile defensive coordinator, but they don't always translate into being a head coach. I mean, we've talked about Oklahoma in the summer here. That didn't work last year with Brent Venables. Didn't work with Tony Elliott from the offensive side off of Clemson staff last year. But Elko came in from Jimbo at Texas A&M. Man, he worked. And before that, at Notre Dame and Wake Forest before that. Very well accomplished, so he knows the territory in the ACC. But what surprised a lot of ACC followers last year, we knew the defense would probably be better with his fingerprints on it, but the offense got much, much more productive. Post David Cutcliffe, very surprising. You mentioned Riley Leonard, great dual threat. I mean, he ran for almost 700 yards last year, plus all the passing.
Mm-hmm.
So he really gives them a threat. Now we'll see about what Dabo's got going here this year. He's changed his offense too. He's brought a new coordinator in. And Klubnik now we liked him a lot last year. We thought he'd eventually knock DJ out, but he's still kind of a work in progress. And I just don't think it's going to be quite as easy for Dabo to snap his fingers post Trevor Lawrence and post Watson from years before to go out there and just roll over these ACC teams. It wasn't quite that easy last year. A lot of closer calls. The last couple of years haven't been all that easy for Clemson. And the fact Elko's got Duke playing so much better. They were a real revelation last year. Great against the number, very good straight up bowl winner. And Elko knows what he's doing. You're getting almost 2 touchdowns at home here with a quarterback like that who is very, very dangerous than Leonard. I'm taking the Blue Devils on Monday, Jimmy. I think this is a team, we've talked about them last year. Elko did a great job. No reason to think they're not going to be just as formidable this year. And a little tough number there, I think, for Dabo to get over.
They have a lot returning. I mean, a ton in some key spots, and then second year should only be that's a big year of continuity going from year 1 to year 2, as far as the familiarity with system, staff, the whole thing. And Duke's one of those teams. It's usually sort of the mid majors, but their underclassmen are not going early to the pros. They're staying, getting their education, and it's just so they're an older roster.
Yep.
And we've seen it in basketball, we've seen it in football. And as far as Clemson, I was on campus this past spring, Bruce, and and they showed me the ACC championship trophy or whatever, and went through their facility. And I'm like, those just don't matter as much around here. The fans want more, but be careful. Be careful. Always trying to get over that hump. What it took to get to that spot. All right, Bruce. Every week, your top 5 selections here on Sports Bettor's Paradise. Tell your friends about Sports Bettor's Paradise, and also right now at BetRivers, even more bang for your buck. And that's right, our squares deal. I mean, it is a great opportunity to go and take it. Get extra value with our BetRivers squares. So you can win up to $10,000 in bonus money. Bet $10 in same-game parlays on any game with the squares icon to earn a square. For Bruce Marshall, CBS Sportsline, BetRivers, Sports Bettor's Paradise, VegasInsider.com, BAMSports.net, BAM, Bruce A. Marshall. I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.